Communication training with Dan O'Connor.
Hi everybody, this is Dan O'Connor, and today I have got a great body language tactic for you. Remember that when you are born, the moment we are born, our brain is already hardwired with information that allows us to read body language. We don't have to learn how to do it. For example, if you were in a room isolated for your entire life, and at 20 years old you finally got to leave this room, never having seen another human being in your life, as soon as you saw other human beings, you would be able to interpret correctly their body language because the brain is hardwired knowing how to read and interpret correctly body language. So learning how to implement certain strategies to reinforce your message is crucial for the savvy communicator. Also, it's crucial to learn how to interpret messages that maybe your subconscious knows, but your conscious does not know. So today what we're going to do is focus on a body language strategy that will help you detect a liar.
Wow!
Remember, we have two sides to the brain, and it's interesting, we have learned almost everything that we know about the brain in the past 50 years. But what we now know is the two sides or hemispheres of the brain do very distinct things. Remember that we have the left-hand side of the brain, which has things such as logic and numbers and memory, and then we have the right-hand side of the brain, which basically is where your creativity lives, where your big picture thinking lives, where your emotions live. And when you access one side of the brain, you are naturally drawn out of the other. It is almost impossible for the average person to access both sides of the brain at the same time. Most of us, when we access one side, we are drawn out of the other. Keep that in mind for future lessons. Today's lesson is all about how to detect when somebody is lying to you based on where they're looking. If you are pulled over by the police, what do they normally say right away when you rolled on your window? What's the first thing that an officer will say to you? Chances are the officer will say to you, "Do you know how fast you were going?" Or, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Or if you're like me in Tampa last week, they'll say to you, "Why didn't you pull over in the parking lot or the side of the road or any of the other places that you could have instead of here on the berm in a school zone?" But whatever they ask you, remember, if an officer asks you a question, you have an opportunity to get out of the ticket. The odds of you getting out of the ticket will increase if you know the strategy that we're about to learn today. Because when people ask you those types of questions, "Do you know why I pulled you over? Do you know how fast you were going?" Or if you make time for justice and you watch Judge Judy, when a judge asks you a question, when we are asked something, like right now I'm going to ask you, I'd like you to think of your phone number at work. What is your phone number at work backwards, including the area code? You ready? Go. Okay, did you think about it? If you stopped and thought about it right now, chances are what you did was this. You stopped, you looked to the left. Because when we stop and think about something that requires memory, especially numbers, we will stop and look to the left. That's what we do. If you stop and look to the right, what that means is you're accessing what side of the brain? That's the creative side. When we stop and think about something, we'll either look over to the left or we'll look over to the right. We don't just cross our eyes or look straight up. We'll look over to the left side or to the right side. And what we're doing when we do that is we are physically searching the hemisphere of the brain where that information lives. So if I ask you what your phone number is backwards, or if I ask you what's 6 times 12, and you have to stop and think about it, you're going to look over to the left. Now, just as an added bit, if you look up to the left, you tend to be thinking about how it looks. You're doing it visually. If you look to the side and the left, that tends to be you're thinking about how it sounds. If you look down to the left, you're thinking about how something felt. But if you look over to the right, that's, remember, creativity. So you're thinking, how would it look? Or how would it sound? Or how would that feel? So if you were to ask your spouse, for example, "Sweetheart, I saw a charge on our credit card statement that I didn't recognize. It was for $345 at the Westin. Do you know anything about that?" If they look over to the left, that means they're thinking, "What is that charge about? Do I remember that?" But what does it mean if they look over to the right? They're thinking of a good one for you. So remember, some questions require creativity. You know, if I were to ask you, what would it be like if you were to travel to the moon? What do you think it would be like? You would probably look over and think, what would that be like? Because that's creativity. But if I were to ask you, where were you last Thursday night? And you were to do this, it's funny how many people, if you ask them questions such as, what did you do last Thursday? It's funny how many people will do this. They'll do this. Because first they look and they think, what did I do? And then they think, oh, I'm not telling them that. And then they look over to the right and then make up something for you. So out of all of the strategies that we will be discussing on how to detect a liar, there are many. That is the first one that any savvy communicator should know. You should know how to look at someone's eyes and determine what side of the brain they're searching and what information lives in that side of the brain simply by where they're looking. Up to the left is, remember, how something looked, sounded, felt. Up to the right, how something would look, would sound, would feel. So, looking over to the left, you're remembering. Looking over to the right, you're making it up. So, if you know that one strategy, you are leaps and bounds ahead of the average communicator. And with the other strategies you'll be learning here at Dan O'Connor Training, you will be able to detect a liar anytime, anywhere, and nothing will get past you. So I look forward to our next lesson. As you see, Maggie is joining us in these lessons. She is she has just given birth to 6 babies. Buddy will also be joining us in our lessons. So from Maggie and Buddy and Dan here at Dan O'Connor Training, this is Dan O'Connor signing off.